Alan Cohen, and this is the Quarantine Interviews. Well, we're back for another round of quarantine interviews. The support and the goodwill from all my listeners before, when we were deep into quarantine, have been requesting that I come back, even though we're slowly getting out of quarantine. Things have changed. Quarantine beard is gone. People are starting to move around. Restaurants are opening 25%, yet it's still very tight all over. New Jersey especially. The music scene has just about stopped, but we're starting to open again. Some clubs are letting musicians play outside. So slowly the music scene is coming back. Broadway, still dark. Many of my colleagues still out of work. Terrible scene, and we're still waiting for that to happen, but I don't see Broadway happening for at least to midway 2021. So it looks like we're going to be doing more and more quarantine interviews to keep you informed about the musicians, the music industry people that I work with, and that I'm so fortunate enough to interview. As we're sitting here today, I got a great guest. His name is Lou Volpe. He's an international jazz guitarist. His credits include Bette Midler, Chaka Khan, Roberta Flack, and such jazz giants as Chet Baker, Herbie Mann, Freddie Hubbard. He also has an extensive Broadway career. Back then he did Sugar Babies, Promises, Promises, the original Grease. So Lou has been all around, and he's also a recording artist himself, and he'll talk about his new record. So I'd like to introduce to you Lou Volpe. Hi Lou, how are you today?
Okay, Al, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to see you, Lou. It's really great. We haven't spoken in quite a while. It's been quite some time. When we originally met, I'll let some of our fans know that when we originally met, we met in the Pits on Broadway, and you were playing banjo. You were the banjo man back then at a show called Sugar Babies, which was with Mickey Rooney and Ann Miller. You remember back then? Can you remember that far back?
Oh, sure. I remember that better than like yesterday morning.
That was one of your favorite gigs, right? There were all the Sugar Babies, yeah.
That was amazing. Mickey was such a talent.
Yeah.
Just incredible, right?
Yeah. So it was funny the way we met, and then we'll continue from there. But I just wanted to start here because that's where we have our, camaraderie. I was playing in the pits of a chorus line. There was a guy in the back of the thing, and he came backstage and he said, "Hi, I'm Glenn Roven." Now, anybody who knows Glenn or doesn't know him, he was a great conductor. He was a young protege of Leonard Bernstein. And he came backstage and says, "Al, I want you to come and meet my guitarist, Lou Volpe, at Sugar Babies." And then I did come there, and I met you. And from that moment on, it's been a great relationship that we know each other since then. And you were playing banjo then with Mickey Rooney, correct?
That's right. I was playing, I believe it was the 5-string banjo, which was a stretch for me at the time because I was mostly playing guitar, And but you live and learn, so I got playing banjo.
Right, and it's all the plectrum banjo, so it's more like, not when you say 5-string, people might think of bluegrass, but it's really with the pick, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what we did. Yeah.
Well, I gotta confess, and then I'll let you take it from here. You played it in guitar tuning.
I did in the beginning as I was learning. Yes, that's true.
Right? Was it odd? Did you eventually switch over to?
Yeah, eventually tuned up, the violin or the regular banjo tune.
Right, in fifth, and it sounds much different when you hear a banjo in guitar tuning. It's low because the top note is in E. But if you are on a banjo, plectrum banjo, your top note is in A. So it's much higher. So it really pops through that orchestra.
It gives you half an octave. Yeah, it's great, and the voicings on the instrument also They just sing out a little more.
Right, because it's all in fifths. Like you said, you mentioned violin, so it's like a violin tuning.
Yes, I think that's what I did. I forget what we tuned the bottom string to, which was a higher string, which,
C,
but
E, D, and A.
D and A, that's it.
So you're not practicing banjo tuning anymore. Great.
No, haven't been visiting the banjo, but that was my original instrument that I wanted to play.
Oh, I didn't know that. Tell me about it.
I wanted to learn the banjo. I used to hear the banjo as a kid, and it was such a happy sound, and it just used to make people feel good. So I said, I want to play that instrument. But they didn't have a banjo teacher at the music school that my mom brought me to. And so I took up guitar, and eventually I'd work my way up to banjo, but it never quite happened.
Great. So when did you really start playing? Probably at a very early age, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I started, I guess it was about 11 or 12 years old. And I had a ukulele in the house before that, since I was 4 or 5. I had some pictures that we actually used on the new CD. And I always had a ukulele with the big fat felt tip,
Yeah.
pick, I should say. And so that was the deal up until I started with the guitar, which was very rough.
Right. And what were your early influences? Were you around with the Beatles? Is that when you started, or were you more into the jazz scene at an early age?
Yeah. No, I actually, of course, listened to the Beatles and listened to those solos, and country music had Chet Atkins, so I started listening to that a lot.
Yeah.
And he was producing the old-time rock groups. And so, the Beatles had a tremendous influence. You try to cop their solos. But then I got into the jazz thing, don't know how, but I started playing different chords and different progressions, and I just studied jazz. I started transcribing solos, like John Coltrane solos. My practice room was filled with transcriptions of Coltrane, who played, 5-minute solos. McCoy Tyner, I copy his things out note for note. Would take forever, of course. And that was my jazz education, aside from, playing with some of the actual jazz artists.
So through school, you were playing in bands, or did you? What school did you go to? Did you go to music school later, or college, or any of that?
Juilliard, but it was at the time it was so piano intensive.
Yes.
That I just did 2 semesters there. I was majoring in composition, and it was actually hurting my guitar technique. Hitting the piano, maybe because I have this old upright piano at home that I put the thumbtacks in to make it sound different. But it was very hard on my fingers, so I kind of let it go and started studying around town with different arrangers. That's how I learned how to arrange for big band and stuff, and just trying to get to know chords and harmony and stuff like that. So I studied with
Great. What arrangers might have you studied with back then?
There was a guy named Art Murphy who used to write books on transcriptions for Bill Evans. That's what attracted me to him. And there was another guy around town, I can't think of his name, a very famous arranger that I studied with a lot.
Right.
And of course, I studied guitar with Sal Salvador.
Oh, sure.
Sal, he had a big band, and I would get to listen to the band at rehearsals and see and look at their parts and say, wow, how do they make chords on the saxophones, or stuff like that. Got to know the instruments, and started getting gigs writing for big band.
Right. So, Sal Salvador, obviously he has that scale book out with scales in every key, ups and down and thirds and that. So that's where I knew. I didn't realize that he was an arranger originally.
Sal mostly had arrangers come in. As a matter of fact, as a kid, I would arrange some stuff for his band that I had in my head I would try out. And from that, he started, recommending me to some folks around town. There was a drummer named Joe Cusatis who used to have a band, and it was a smaller group, but it was a good experience for me to learn how to write, for a few horns and make it sound good.
Great. So after your education, how did you really break into the scene?
Let's see. I got my first gig through a guy on the scene. He was a keyboard player. His name was Ken Bichelle. And Kenny was doing a lot of the studio stuff and started recommending me to the different producers, and just got to know some folks, and started doing live gigs. Peggy Lee needed a guitar player at one time. Was still in high school, so we did some gigs with her around the country. And when she had to go to Japan, I couldn't go.
Your mom wouldn't let you out of the country, huh?
No, that's very true. Well, that's another story. Yeah, she wouldn't let me out of the house sometimes, but
that's right. All right. So Peggy Lee in high school. I mean, that's pretty high class to be playing. Singer in high school. I mean,
leaving the Bronx and going to Nob Hill and playing one of these extravagant hotels with Peggy. It was quite an experience.
Right. And then where'd you go from there?
Then, what did we do? I guess I did Bette Midler, Broadway. Again, we're back to Broadway. She was doing a Broadway routine, and I started subbing and got the gig. And then she wanted to go on the road. So I did the road, and we did a couple of albums from that.
Oh.
After that was Judy Collins.
Judy Collins, yeah. Now Judy Collins was a long time touring experience for you.
Well, it turned out that way, yeah. Let's see, I was with Judy for quite a few years, and then I had to leave because I was going to Japan with a guy named Terra Masahino, and who was actually extremely big in Japan. He was kind of like the Miles Davis, I guess, but they would have he was so famous, they would have a cutout in the CD, in the record stores, and of him, a life-size cutout. And so he was a big star there, and that was nice. I got to meet a lot of the cats from there. I think that's how I met Herbie Hancock and did some gigs with him around town, which was quite an experience. So from that, it starts to blossom. People recommend you to this, or somebody hears you play, and it just blossoms into more gigs and a lot more knowledge.
Sure. So just tell me a little bit more about Judy, because Judy Collins, of course, is an all-time, Grammy singer-songwriter. She had a big hit with Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now and City of New Orleans. I mean, she has such an incredible, beautiful voice. What was that experience like, and how long did you really play with her?
Well, that was a tremendous learning experience for me. Aside from musically, on the road, you have to kind of adjust and adapt. And she just had that whole thing down. Her road manager just made it so easy to just travel, get to your gig, and concentrate on the music. So I learned a lot about the production of a touring company, let's say.
Yeah. And
behind the scenes, they had a good management scene there. And musically, it was just awesome. And sometimes she's one of those singers where you're playing along and you start listening to her. And the guitar is very important in her arrangements. Mostly all the tunes had a guitar solo, so you had to play within the context of the tune, the character of the song. And just doing that for the first time, or at least early in my playing career, it was just a tremendous learning thing, constantly learning.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think of her as a folk singer, but she's really much more than that. I mean,
Yeah, much more. I mean, she did plenty of that, but we even did a couple of country songs, and so guitar oriented, because she played the guitar. But she was very mesmerizing.
yeah,
Um,
beautiful. So that's a little bit different style. So you're very versatile in playing, with a guy like Herbie Hancock, which is great jazz, with top line jazz, to playing with a woman like, Judy Collins.
right, right. Well, like it might go with all my many personalities that are going on in my head. I don't know,
Great.
but split. But but it's true. I always was doing a different kind of gig. The Broadway scene is different, as you know. You're just going to have to play exactly what you're supposed to play and stay in that character every night. And the jazz scene is more of a natural thing where you kind of play what you feel, but it has to be in a context and it has to be for the audience, which is an important thing for musicians to learn. You're really playing for somebody to listen to your music. So that was an interesting thing when I realized that. I said, "Oh my God, people are hearing what I'm playing. I'm not just playing what I want. I have my own ideas and stuff, but you play them so that somebody could understand what you're playing and relate to it." That's the thing that I, was always striving to do and still am, actually.
Yeah, that's great. And what was your experience like with other artists such as Shaka Khan? You said you played with also. Was that a while or just a couple of shows or?
Chaka, we did a couple of tours. Let's see, we did Japan. I think the first time we went to Japan, it was the Blue Note tour, because at the time, Japan had so many Blue Notes: Osaka, of course, Tokyo, Sapporo, maybe 4 cities, at least, yeah, about 4 cities. And we'd spend almost a week at each sellout every night. I mean, Shaka was incredible. And the interesting thing about that tour was she didn't do any of her hits. She did all jazz pieces like All of Me, Why Not Take All of Me? And tunes like that she just had in her head on the sunny side of the street that she just loved to do. And interestingly enough, when we came to New York, all the singers, the divas, wanted to see what is Shaka doing singing jazz. I thought she was a funk singer or a soul singer. And they would hear and they'd leave. They'd just be in awe.
Yeah.
Phyllis Hyman, everybody. I mean, all the jazz singers really came to see her.
Some of the musicians in those bands, say on bass, was it Anthony Jackson or who was back then?
Let's see. Actually, a fellow that we know real well, Gary Haas,
That's so.
with the Shaka thing.
Well, Gary's one of my partners, one of my all-time friends, and then I didn't realize you were actually on playing with Shaka with him at the time.
Yeah.
Very close with Gary. I didn't realize that you were on that gig. Wow.
Yeah, he actually asked me to play, and Gary, as you know, was one of the big-time producers in New York.
Yeah.
And, so he kind of got me in there, and that led to another couple of tours. One of which was in New York. It wasn't really a tour, but we did the Blue Note, and of course, sell out every night. It's just incredible.
Great.
And
Yeah.
another mesmerizing singer where you're playing behind her and you get so deep into her voice that you can't, you'll fall off the stool or something, which actually never happened, but you get so lost in them. You hear their voice and you go back to those days
Yeah.
And it's just amazing, just amazing. Roberta Flack is like that.
Yeah.
Some singers, they just grab you.
Yeah. And how about Roberta? Any good stories from Roberta Flack?
No, I like one thing she did. She always had like a prayer kind of meeting in the beginning before the gig. Everybody get together, and she'd say, "Thank you for this person. Thank you for you go through all the musicians and singers and backgrounders, and she just put you in the right mood to play. You know, uh, yeah, amazing, amazing."
Great. Roberta Flack, Shaka Khan. These are great names, great stories. All right. So after Roberta Flack, Shaka Khan, such great pop names and vocalists, you went on to other things. And then you mentioned Herbie Hancock. You were telling us some stories about Herbie. Tell me some of that great stuff about Herbie. And you mentioned that you were playing in a big band with him at Lincoln Center. Where was that?
Yeah, I was called to do Lincoln Center. I think it was the Rose Hall, where we had a pretty big band. Maybe I would say at least 12 instruments, and we were playing a lot of Herbie's music. And I remember Herbie had this big wad of music in front of him, and people were yelling out, "Oh, you don't need that music, Herbie. You don't need that music to play." And he stood up, took the microphone, and he said, "The reason why I'm here today is because I can read this music."
That's good.
Got back at them. But such an amazing player. I mean, we'd be playing, and he motioned to me to take a solo, which he did a few times that night. And I was just struck by his comping or his playing underneath my solo that just steered me into the right direction as to what to play. He almost told me what to play just by playing a chord here and there, and just made me sound great, beyond my abilities. And that was the amazing feeling that I had from playing with Herbie. And that happened a few times that night. He's such an amazing musician.
Yeah, I guess that's why Miles used him all that time, right? He probably did that the same with Miles, right?
Yeah, that was the ultimate with Miles.
Sure, great. But then he's been through so many things. He was so diverse, and then he started playing the electric, the sideways keyboard, and then he went more electronic, right?
Yeah, that's true. He had that album that started him off. I think he hooked up with some producers who had that idea for him, and he just took that and ran with it and came up with some amazing grooves and recordings. Just an amazing musician.
Yeah. Hey, from there, what that reminded me of, because he went into that direction, but actually, there was a club called the Bitter End.
Right.
You mentioned Gary Haas, who was one of my partners, old friend who was producing Shaka Khan and Grover Washington, Celine Dion. But we were at the Bitter End, and we sat at the back of the club, on the side of the club, and you were the first one I know that ever played a guitar synth. And you were playing like flute solos and sax solos, and me and Gary were there with our jaws hanging. I go, "Yeah, Lou, you were killing it with all this on the guitar synth. You were really the first guy I ever heard play a guitar synth."
It was very empowering for me to have that sound, because it made me start playing differently. I started playing sax lines, but I always had the guitar doubled on the side. I'd have like the sax or the synth sound with sax or flute or organ in the center, and then I put my guitar maybe on the left and right, and it was just a great experience for me, and another learning experience actually. Sound was always important. It was always like something that I was trying to get my own sound or improve my sound. to the point where, I had the good fortune to spend a week in the studio with Miles Davis.
Oh.
And Marcus Miller was producing the session. No, actually, it was the producer. Marcus Miller was the bass player. The producer was a guy, his name escapes me at the moment. He was doing Elton John. And Buckmaster, Paul Buckmaster was his name. And we went to Columbia Studios, and I remember the one thing, you didn't really talk to Miles. He was kind of like always in the booth, and he would be playing mostly keyboards, unfortunately. He didn't play trumpet, which would have been great for me. I don't know if the session was released, but I don't think so. I spoke to them about it, and I'm not sure if it was released, if Miles actually played the trumpet on it, but he was playing organ and Fender Rhodes, and he did say something to me a couple of times, but one time that sticks in my memory was he said, "You sound too much like a guitar." So I, changed my sound or put the wah-wah or some kind of effect on to change it up. But that was my Miles Davis experience.
That's good. Now, but one thing I didn't want to go back to Herbie, but you did mention to me earlier before that you wrote some of the songs on the Herbie album.
Oh, that was the Herbie Mann, actually.
Oh, Herbie Mann, yeah.
I was doing a lot of touring with Herbie Mann.
Right.
And I would say about 90% to 80% of the songs we did were my original songs in the repertoire. And to the point when we did go to Atlantic Studios to record the album, he named the album after my song, which was Astral Island. And Herbie gave me quite a bit of opportunities. And also through Herbie, I met a lot of different people, Freddie Hubbard, different people involved in the jazz scene. And it just kept me going on that one desire to play better, more expressive, more creatively.
Terrific. So, Lou, tell us a little bit of what you're doing now. Since you were writing back with Herbie, I would imagine you're doing a lot of your own writing and production now.
Yeah, very much. That's mostly what I do is my own original stuff. We just released an album called Before and After, and it's all original except for two songs. I do Summertime and Stella by Starlight, and all the rest is my original stuff that I recorded with my friends, some studio guys. Buddy Williams did the drums. Stanley Banks was on bass most of the time. Percussionist named Gary Fritz. And so we just got together and I made them do what they do in the groove of the song. And we came up with 14 songs.
That's great. And what label are you putting this out on?
That's on Jazz Guitar Records, which is a label we put together ourselves. And we're promoting it now to the point where we have a pretty good amount of airplay. We were just above 100, as they say. That's the number they give you, how much airplay you're getting. I was in the top 114 in the country. So we'll see. We're trying to get down to
big country, Lou. It's a big country. That's still pretty good. Let's break it. Everybody listen. You got to listen to Lou Volpe's new album to bring them down under 100. Come on. Now, you're doing a lot of marketing, and that's how I really hooked back up with you, because I haven't seen you in many, many years. And you're doing a lot of marketing now on Facebook and, the other social media. So what are you doing to really promote yourself? Are you working with a promotion team, a marketing person? Because I'm starting to see you all over now where I haven't seen you before.
Well, for one thing, I'm doing a weekly jazz cast, a podcast called Lou Volpe's Jazz Cast. And in that, I talk about some experiences with all the artists I've played with, how they've affected my recordings, how they affect my writing, and what I play. And sometimes I'll do a little story on them. Occasionally, I'll give them a little background story. Nothing too telling, but so the podcast consists of some stories, some the music, and some ideas behind the music. And I record mostly original, like I said, and so we're promoting the album that way. And also, I have, like I said, some good radio play, and just trying to get publicity, which is very important because you want everyone to know you have it out there so that they can listen to it and see if they like it. But we think it's special, so
Sure.
we worked hard. And we
Hear this record, and how do they get to your site?
that's louvolpejazz.com, and we have all the info there and some videos and little excerpts from the album so you could hear before you buy it.
That's great, great. So, I just remembered because we spoke a while ago, but many years back, I actually produced a record for you.
Right. That's right. We went up to a Connecticut studio, and
I forgot.
you came up with some nice ideas. It was such a great thing for me to have someone like you to produce it, where I just play the stuff and you make it sound right. It was quite a nice experience.
Great experience. So, why don't you sign off? Give us a little, a sign off in these troubling times. Obviously, it's hard to play out, so you're doing more in the studio stuff. Just a little word of inspiration to carry us through till we get out of quarantine.
Yeah, till we get out of quarantine. Well, it's going to end. People get so depressed, and especially my musicians friends. They get so down, but we have to realize, this is a temporary situation. We've been through bad stuff before, and we'll get through this and come back stronger. The music will be stronger, and I think people will just be ready for something new, and it's going to end soon. I don't think it'll last that long. Broadway will be back maybe early next year. After the new year, and I feel that we're going to do a lot of live performances. We have a couple of concerts planned, just waiting for the time to be right.
That's great. Lou, it's really been a pleasure speaking with you today, interviewing you, hearing some of these legends that you've played with. You're so versatile, and it's really been an honor to hear you. And anybody that hasn't heard of Lou Volpe needs to really check out your site, check out your records, and it'll uplift you. And you're very inspirational, and it comes through in every note you play, Lou.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. So once again, everybody, this has been an interview with Lou Volpe, international jazz guitarist, wonderful person, great guitar player. And I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. My name is Alan Cohen, and this is the Quarantine Interviews.